How does it feel to be on the cusp of your biggest success as an artist, only to have it all delayed on account of a pandemic? I'm Danielle Radoichin, and in this episode of In Talks With, my guest is the artist Emma Talbot. Originally from the West Midlands, she studied at the Birmingham Institute of Art and Design, the Royal College of Art, and at the British School at Rome, and for the past 30 years, she has lived and worked in London as a teacher and as a mother to 2 boys, and since 2010 as an artist. Known for her sensuous work, she is also something of a Renaissance woman, working across painting, sculpture, film, and even composing her own music. I spoke to her in March 2021, when she was Artist of the Month for Circa, the monthly public installation at Piccadilly Circus. She had also recently been awarded the Max Mara Art Prize for Women, for which she will undergo a residency in Italy and eventually show at the Whitechapel Gallery, when COVID restrictions will allow. I spoke to her about making a virtue out of delayed gratification and about how her art has adapted to embrace change. You're the star of the show at Piccadilly Circus at the moment. I logged on last night at 8 o'clock. I couldn't be and actually physically at Piccadilly Circus, but I did look at it online and I've seen the videos. And you're the latest in a line of artists that have worked with Circa, following in the footsteps of the likes of Ai Weiwei and Patti Smith. How does it feel is that enormous sort of billboard, which is normally reserved for advertisers? How does it feel having your work up there?
It's quite mind-blowing, to be honest. I think it's the biggest screen in Europe, so it's giant size and it's the whole of the screen. So to make something on a laptop and then see it at that scale in the centre of London on a kind of iconic screen that you've sort of seen a lot. I mean, I live in London, so, I'm really familiar with that space. So it's really amazing. And also the way that I was concerned that the animation maybe wouldn't render well enough to look good on that screen, but it looks really amazing quality and clear. And so there's something about seeing the work like that in that living space, even though we're in lockdown, that's really, really exciting. That leap from something you're making by yourself into a very public space is really, it's exciting.
Visions for a Hopeful Future is what the series is called. So there's a positive message that comes across already from that title. Can you talk a bit about what's in the films, what they're about, what they show?
Yeah, so they all of them collectively have a sort of similar idea, which is that this period of time that we're living through it's terrible because we have to rethink all the structures of how we live. We had to really accommodate a lot of things that we weren't at all familiar with. And it's been seismic in the way it changes us. But it's also a period of time where we can pause and think about how we'd like to proceed in the future, how we'd like to live, how we'd like systems to be set up. And during lockdown, I had been listening online to lots of different talks and reading a lot about, particularly women writers and thinkers who were talking about the way we should proceed given this kind of disruption of this period of time. And in particular, Arundhati Roy wrote an article that was called "The Pandemic is a Portal." And it was really about the way that we could use this time to really rethink. And I found that very powerful because, it's such a difficult situation. It felt very powerful to be thinking about, how we might make use of something that is, a period of grief and something dreadful, but we might think of it as a kind of positive in some aspects and be able to really reorder. It sounds kind of general saying it like that, but Arundhati Roy talks about capitalism as a kind of engine that's like crashing, and that we could look at that and try to replicate the parts and fix it, or we could really think about making a new engine. And that really excited me. So the films describe the year that we've had in lots of different ways. One of them asks, what is a city if there's no one in it? And how does a city function now? And then there's always a period of time in the animations where the figures sort of go through a transformative moment, which is, our moment of thinking. And they move towards this kind of state of hopefulness where they think about, their relationship to nature, or the way that they might work as a community, or, there are different aspects in each of the films, but each of them has this sort of transformative quality.
At this time, it's something that everybody can relate to because everybody's been through it. So it's a universal thing that's happened. So maybe more even than ever, even if your art is the most accessible and relatable art ever, this is on an even bigger platform. Is that so? I found the art with the films very accessible and sort of easy, beautiful and thought-provoking, but also easy to understand. Was that something that you were trying to get across because of sort of mainstream platform that it's on?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about a public audience and the way that you convey ideas to a public audience in this very brief period of time, like 2 minutes, just over 2 minutes. How do you convey a set of ideas? And in the animations, there are always bits of text that I write myself, and they come up as suggestions of ideas. So the text kind of conveys a lot of ideas through the work. But it's also, I wanted it to be very visually appealing, so that, I imagined, not that many people are walking through Piccadilly Circus at the moment, but I imagined the atmosphere or the environment really changing because of the look of the films. Like, they're very dreamlike, they're very deliberately colourful, and the materiality of they're made with drawings on paper, and so the materiality of the paper can be seen, so that you hopefully get to see something which is not like advertising. So you're arrested, differently in that space, and it's really important that the narrative is quite direct and readable and understandable.
I agree that they're really beautiful. You can imagine them as prints on clothing.
Yeah,
they're sort of very pretty. I love the music as well. Is that something you commissioned especially?
no,
And
I made it. I made it myself. I kind of do all parts of what I make. So making the soundtrack is actually a really fun part, because the animation is so slow and deliberate to make. Frame by frame, you have to move every part. So then at the end of making the visuals, then I play along with, make electronic sound along with the animation. And the electronic sound is quite comparatively rough and, disruptive. And it's not like a kind of beautiful flowing thing like the visuals are. So I like the way it acts as another voice, and it sort of tells a bit of a kind of narrative. It sort of conveys the narrative in a way that adds to the animation. It sort of tells us something else about the way you could understand the atmosphere of the imagery.
That's incredible that you wrote the music as well. I didn't realize that. And also, I suppose it's interesting because it becomes interactive in that way, because in order to hear the music, you need the person looking at the art needs to, if they're looking at it at Piccadilly Circus, they'll need to put their headphones in and access via the Circa website, I believe, to hear the music. So in that way, it becomes suddenly an interactive piece. I like the idea that it happens at a certain time. It felt exciting.
It's quite clever the way that Circa have made that, 2020 last year, 2021 this year. So it's like the time we're in. It's really about, this is something happening in the time we're in. And that was what I really responded to when I was making the animations. I thought, I really want to make something that responds to the time we're experiencing.
And I was interested with this positivity angle. Are you a positive person naturally yourself, or was it something that you sort of had to work on, like a lot of us have had to during this past year, in order to reach some kind of level of acceptance about what's been happening?
Yeah, I think all of us, we're not one shade. So we have the potential to be positive or to be sort of, quite unhappy about things. We all have that potential to sort of move between those states. But I think that there's something that comes out of adversity that, I'm a widow, and I brought up our two sons, after my husband died, and that kind of feeling of, your life falling apart, and adversity can be totally overwhelming. But I think I learned from that experience that you gather a kind of strength from those experiences, that you see yourself, even if you don't feel it all the time, you see yourself being the person who can cope, who can survive, who can find a way to reconstruct. And that has been so informative for me in thinking about, how do we move through experiences in life.
I was so sorry to hear about your husband. How did he pass away, and when was it?
It was 15 years ago, so it's a long time ago now, and he had cancer. So he was very ill for a brief amount of time, and then he died. But and thank you. But I think the situation with the pandemic is, it's different in that we're all experiencing it. It's not, when you grieve because someone's died, you're in that grief, and other people around you may not be at all. But in this situation, we're all in the same situation. And some of the things that happened at the beginning of the first lockdown, which were, things that I planned being cancelled, or, shows that I was hoping to have, couldn't happen. It felt like those were really moments of instability, but everybody was experiencing it. So you could feel like, in a way, you could relax around that.
You could really have the right to complain. Yeah.
Right. So you can kind of say, yes, it's awful, but it doesn't feel quite as, it didn't feel as under pressure as maybe it feels when you're experiencing a singular situation and other people around you just aren't in that zone, Yeah. So I found something reassuring about us all being in it together.
Yeah, shared experience, lessening the load. That's quite interesting. And as you just referenced, there's the irony that there's two things: that you've been telegraphed, your art's being broadcast at Piccadilly Circus, one of the most iconic parts of one of the most iconic cities in the world, where there's usually thousands and thousands of people passing through every day, and at the moment there's no one there.
I know.
And last year, you were awarded the Max Mara Art Prize for Women, which is the biannual award. I think was in collaboration with the Whitechapel Gallery in London, which supports UK-based female artists who've not previously had a major solo exhibition.
Yeah.
And it would have led to a residency in Italy, which had to then be postponed on account of the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think it's been rescheduled for at some point when you can presumably go back there, but I would imagine you might not know when that is right now.
Yeah, at the moment it's uncertain when it will be.
What all these things happening, I mean, it seems to me like you've dealt with it with incredible equanimity, and you could imagine that somebody who might have had a freak out and thought, oh God, why does this always happen to me? But you've sort of almost made a virtue out of these things by responding in a way that's tapping into people's positive responses to what's been going on.
I think the other thing is that in the first lockdown, I was shielding myself because I had pneumonia. So I couldn't go to the studio. And that's when I started making animations that I'd never made them before. So it's a very recent thing. But it felt like, what am I going to do? I'm going to stay at home feeling awful and, not go to the studio and feel like everything's fallen apart. Or I can try to do something that I thought of doing before, but I didn't know how to do it. I can try and teach myself to do something. And it felt really great to think, okay, I can't do what I planned to do, but I'll find something that I can do that's a kind of learning experience. And even though, if I'm honest, I'm desperate to get to Italy. I'd really like to.
I bet.
Yeah. And to have that opportunity at the same time, I feel like, well, what am I going to do? I can't just sort of wallow in a sense of disappointment. It's much better for me to feel like I'm going to do something proactive and,
So you're an autodidact in that way. I mean, it seems like, you compose your own music. You had this time during lockdown, so you decided to start doing animation.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you studied art. I think you're originally from Stourbridge, but you studied at the Birmingham Institute of Art and Design for a BA,
Yeah.
and then you studied at the Royal College of Art for an MA
Yeah.
in painting, where you graduated in 1995. Um, what's happened in that period since finishing in the mid-90s and now, when you're sort of gaining this recognition? Can you just give us a bit of a sense about what you were up to in those intervening years?
Well, I spent a lot of those years teaching in art schools because, as I said, I was a single parent for a long period of time and had to be responsible for us financially. So I was working, and I was lucky in that I had jobs teaching at Central St Martin's and now at the Royal College. So I was trying to hold everything together for us as a family. And I was always making my work, but there came a kind of crunch point where I felt that my work didn't really represent what I was thinking about because I was going through this period of grief. So I completely changed my practice. I sort of let go of everything and started again and started making things that really sort of came from the heart, if that doesn't sound corny, but they were really much more about things that I was honestly thinking and feeling. And then it seemed like that built up as a practice that I felt that it connected with other people much more. It seemed like people could understand the work and engage with it much better. And it just then built up that I was being offered different opportunities that I felt really excited about working towards.
That's sorry, just to interrupt, but that's so interesting, that idea of tapping into something that feels true or that feels right for you.
Yeah.
How did you know? I think that's something that a lot of creative people struggle with, whether they're writers or painters or whatever have you. How did you know, or what was it that made you discover what that was, and how did you know that it was the right thing for you, and it was what would kind of resonate with people?
I didn't know that it would resonate with people because I wasn't thinking about other people. At the beginning, I was thinking, well, first of all, I genuinely thought, well, I'm not an artist. I can't do it. I'm not an artist. So I'll have to give up. But then when I had that thought, I immediately was thinking, well, if I'm not an artist, then I could make whatever I want. And it felt like that sort of bit of me that was like when I was a child and I could just make drawings or make something and not worry about where it went to, what happened to it, what other people thought, just seemed to be ignited again. So I was really making small drawings just for myself. And I found that I really liked them and I really wanted to, look at them. And then when I showed them to other people, which didn't happen immediately, people had a really sort of genuine response to them. And that was new for me because I think I tried very hard to be a good artist, but was striving kind of to do something a bit external from myself. And then over time, it just felt that over time, I built up a way of a kind of language for myself, a way of really exploring my own thinking. And it just built from there. It sort of grew from there. But it's really important to me when I'm making work that I have to feel like it has real meaning for me.
And is there a routine that you stick to, or a ritual, or a way of working? And has it always been the same, or is it something that's changed over the years?
So I suppose if there's a routine, it's that I make a lot of drawings as a way to generate ideas or see what I'm thinking. So I make a lot of drawings and I make them at home. And then I take them to the studio and I lay them out. I don't worry really about what they are or what they look like. I just lay them out and I start realizing there's a subject matter. There's something on my mind that's preoccupying me. And then I start thinking about how that might become a bigger piece of work or a more extended piece of work. And, and then I do that, but I kind of, because I make paintings on silk, which are really large scale, or I make 3-dimensional work, or I now make animations, I sort of move between different modes of making. And I sort of feel like by the time I get almost exhausted with one mode, then I'm ready to move to something else. And then I can move around them on a sort of rotation without feeling like I ever get bored, really.
I wanted to speak a bit about the piece the proposal that won you the Max Mara Prize. So it was a response to Gustav Klimt's painting called The Three Ages of Women, which he painted in 1905, which you used as a starting point for the project. And I read that you said it was a feminist response to the shame of aging, because the picture itself represents three women at different ages, and the older woman is she's sort of hiding her head, or she's somehow looks shameful. Can you talk a bit about that and why you wanted to focus on that and why that whole idea is important to you?
Yeah, so I was fascinated by this painting for a while, and I think because I have, now longer grey hair, and so does the woman in the painting, and she's naked, standing with her head in her hands. And I was looking at the painting thinking, that's called Three Ages of Women. It's a baby, a young woman, and then an elderly woman who has to look shameful, that we're supposed to be repelled by. And I thought, well, that's almost like a kind of, for me, a sort of spectre of the future. You become this old woman, and then you're imagined or seen by society like that, in a dismissive way. But I kept looking at the painting thinking there's something else about this painting that I can't quite figure out what it is, that is really important. And when I researched it, the painting was made in 1905, but it was bought by the Galleria Nazionale in Rome in 1912 to celebrate 50 years of the unification of Italy. And when you hear that, you think, well, how does this painting have anything to do with the unification of a country? And we're in a period of time now where nationalism is becoming a very sort of contested subject. It's very sort of alive as a subject across Europe, across, the States, in Britain. And I started thinking this painting is about modernism, the kind of desire for something new and modern, and pushing away old kind of ancient laws and systems and superstitions and ancient practices and ways of thinking that are deemed shameful. And then I thought about our current situation, the sort of crisis that we're facing ecologically, and the sorts of structures that are falling apart around us. And I was thinking, actually what we're doing is looking towards these older, more ancient practices now and reincorporating them into our lives because we realized they had a value. So this made me think I'd really like to take this woman as a protagonist in a narrative in my work and make her into someone who has the ultimate agency. So I don't want an elderly woman to be seen as someone redundant. I want them to be valued because they're experienced and knowledgeable and, they're capable. So I thought I would set her in a sort of double narrative where she goes to the future. She's like a future survivor. And in that future, she has to learn practices like permaculture or relearn ancient practices in order to live a sustainable future. And she'd also go right back to the past. And when I was in Rome one time, I'd seen this image above one of the government buildings, which is like a carving of a lion skin. And I was really curious about it. Why is that there? And I realized it's the Nemean lion, which is the lion that Hercules killed. And it was like his protective coat. And that is representative of government. So I thought if this elderly woman went back in time and she was challenged with the 12 trials of Hercules, then I wonder how she would do them, because Hercules resolved them by killing and capture and theft and trickery and types of colonization. And I thought, I bet an old woman who's like really wise and knowledgeable would look at those tasks and think about them quite differently, and think about, commensalism and mutualism and more benevolent and caring ways of being. And I thought I'd really love to think of that as a way of reordering power structures.
Wow. Yeah, I think he killed his own family, didn't he, Hercules?
I think the story is that he killed his own family and he felt such a regret for this kind of moment of madness that then he was tasked with these 12 kind of reparative tasks. But they're all like extremely aggressively resolved. And if you read each of the trials, they're really problematic, you know. So I find them really interesting to grapple with, you know, to rethink.
And for when you do finally go to Italy and begin work on this project, will it? And I believe eventually it will be it'll be exhibited back at the Whitechapel.
Yeah,
is that the idea?
Yeah.
So you work on you spend, is it a year working on the piece in Italy, doing different things?
So you go to Italy for 6 months and you have a period of really intensive research where you go and see lots of different things and gather lots of information. And then you have a period of time to make the show, which is solo show at Whitechapel Gallery. And then that show goes to Collezione Maramotti in Reggio Emilia. So
lovely.
It gets seen twice, yeah.
So Max Mara funds it and you get to choose whereabouts you go? Or do they say to you, you're going here, you're living here? And
you choose because you make the proposal, and then they're amazingly generous because they really want you to be able to fulfill your proposal, you know, the thing that you'd really like to do. And then they organise the places that you're going to be staying and around the things that you suggest you really would like to do. So I'll be going to Rome for 2 months, and then I'll go to Reggio Emilia for 2 months where I'm going to learn to make intarsia knitting, so I can make 3-dimensional works with that. And then I'm going to Catania for 2 months so that I can find out about permaculture, and also there's the ruins of the Temple of Hercules in Sicily. So it's quite comprehensive.
Yeah, God, it is. I mean, and what an opportunity! And it sounds like you'll be making the most of it and learning lots of new things, true to your true to your, what you've done in the past. And in the meantime, until you're able to go and fulfill that mission, what are you doing? What are you working on? Anything or taking a break?
So I've got some shows coming up which are later in the year. So I've got a show at Centre d'Art Pascal in Biel in Switzerland, and I'm making work for that now because I'm having to kind of reorder the order in which I do things, as, you know, it's like a kind of trying to figure out how things happen around maybe going on the residency at some point soon, hopefully. So I'm working towards that. And then next year I also have a show at Kunsthalle Gießen in Germany. So I have things to do, and I can use the time now to get ready.
It's exciting. I feel like I'm speaking to you at a momentous time when you're on the precipice of doing newer and bigger things. It's exciting. Well, good luck with it, and thank you for taking the time to speak to me and share all your thoughts.
I think
it's really lovely what you're doing.
Thanks very much. It's been a real pleasure for me.
You've been listening to In Talks with me, Danielle Radoichin. The sound and theme music were by Wargie Productions, and the artwork is by Patrick Waugh. If you enjoyed this episode, please pass it on to someone who you think might also like it. And of course, please do subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for listening.